Your Excellency, the Ambassador of Cuba, distinguished members of the diplomatic corps, leaders of political parties, and friends of the Students' Federation of India and other organizations. This seminar is designed to focus on the current attacks, military attacks, violating the sovereignty of numerous countries. And as far as we know, President Trump has bombed at least 7 countries in the period he has been in office. Trump came to the White House with the promise to end the United States' endless wars. And we know what happened in the first term, but he also, it was widely reported, aspired to the Nobel Peace Prize. He said that on many occasions. The head of FIFA, shamefully, has already given him a peace prize. But this reminds us of what the satirist and songwriter, the great songwriter Tom Lehrer said when Henry Kissinger was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1973. And there Tom Lehrer, whose songs some of you, at least my generation, would be familiar with, made this famous comment that political satire became obsolete when Henry Kissinger was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Today, The Economist, in its cover story, a right-wing publication, a conservative publication, but very critical of Trump's present course, points out that Trump announced that he had destroyed 100% of Iran's military capabilities. So The Economist then, in the lead article, comments, the 0% that remains is playing havoc with the global economy by choking off 10 to 15% of its oil supply. Trump's war of choice, it goes on, is more unpopular within the US, but within American voters, than any recent conflict. And the odds, The Economist points out, of a thumping for the Republicans in the midterms in November of this year just grew shorter. And it's widely expected that the Republicans will lose control of the House, and the Democrats need to win 4 seats to take control of the Senate. But more importantly than all that, our distinguished ambassador was pointing out to me that today is an important day in the United States because all over the country, mass protests have broken out on the No Kings movement, Stop the War, and so on. I remember our experiences during Vietnam's glorious struggle against US imperialist aggression and occupation. And at that time, although it started late, the way public opinion turned against the war in Vietnam, in Cambodia, and Laos, rather late in the day, and voted out the leaders. I think that was an inspiring experience, historical experience many of us remember. So it's very important to pay close attention to the mood of the people of the United States. Of course, a large proportion of the Republican Party supports this fascistic war unleashed against Iran. Totally unprovoked. on and the threats held out against Cuba. Earlier, of course, they committed the crime of abducting the president of Venezuela on completely trumped up charges, fake charges, and we shall see how that develops. Threats are being held against Cuba, and there are others who are very familiar with the historical and current situation in Latin America. Cuba in particular, who will speak on this issue. But Donald Trump has walked into a situation, I think, where there is no easy exit. He has repeatedly talked about talks with Iran, talks on the basis of the so-called 15-point program. Iran has denied it. Iran has made it clear that it has its own conditions for stopping this fight. It did not initiate this fight. Talks were going on under Omani mediation, and a deal was declared possible by the Omani foreign minister. The deal was in sight, and treacherously, the United States and Israel that is a law unto itself, Israel that has carried out many genocidal offenses, particularly in Gaza, but also the persecution of Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. Israel and the United States treacherously launched an attack on Iran, everybody knows about it, and assassinated the head of the country, the supreme leader, the Ayatollah. And to everyone's surprise, perhaps, in the US establishment, although it is reported some cautioned Trump against getting into this situation, the implications of this war that they have launched. Iran has hit back. So this, I think, is a major development. I don't know how many of us expected Iran to wage this war of attrition. A country of 90 million people with enormous economic potential and an advanced missile program. It's pointed out by Stanley Johnny in an article in the Hindu that ring-fenced by tall mountains, roughly 70 times the size of Israel. It's a geographical fortress. And Iran has fought above itself. Iran, waging a regional war, has struck American military bases and other American assets. It has hit data centers, and it has, in de facto terms, closed the Strait of Hormuz, allowing ships of so-called friendly countries through, one by one perhaps. And this has created economic turmoil on a global basis, and India, I think, is one of the worst hit countries in this respect. I'll come to that aspect a little later in this, but first we have to unequivocally condemn the unprovoked, brutal and fascistic attack on Iran, and we must express solidarity regardless of what we think of the leadership of Iran, since its sovereignty has been violated against all tenets of international law, against the UN Charter and so on. War crimes have been committed, since humanitarian crimes have been committed against humanitarian law. School girls have been murdered in one of the missile strikes. Trump tried to deny it, cover it up. The truth has come out. We must express the strongest solidarity with Iran on all these counts. in total contrast to the shameful policy adopted by the BJP government, the Modi government, in this respect. Not only did they fail to condemn the assassination, first condole to the Iranian embassy with the assassination of the supreme leader. Not only did they fail to condemn this act, later on Foreign Secretary went and quietly signed some book, but it showed what it was. They also created the feeling through the Prime Minister's visit to Israel, precisely the wrong moment, that there was some kind of collusion, or at least this visit provided a cover for Netanyahu to, along with the United States, to launch this attempt, this atrocious attack. We can take heart from the fight that Iran has been waging. I read a report in the Financial Times that the Russian Federation has, it has to be verified, that the Russian Federation has delivered some missiles, food and other supplies to this. And other countries, I think some other countries have also taken a clear stand. Europe has been alienated from this, particularly on the demand that the Strait, they must go and send warships to clear the Strait of Hormuz. I think they are shying away from this, and Trump has been very vocal on what he thinks of NATO's European allies, and he's even spoken about against that. The Mukul Kesavan, in an article published in the Telegraph recently, makes an important point about India's position compared with China's take on the war. And I'm quoting from this. China is a large importer of Iranian oil. Closure of the Strait of Hormuz is not in its interest. China did not veto the UN Security Council's resolution condemning Iran's egregious attacks upon its neighbors. It abstained. But China's representative pointed out that the US and Israel had bombed Iran without Security Council authorization and called upon those countries to stop. China supported the protests of the Gulf Arab state against Iran's strikes, while arguing the obvious that the resolution was lopsided because it didn't mention the US-Israeli aggression that began the war. India shamefully co-sponsored the resolution without mentioning the attack on Iran. And I think this is an article called Grey Silence that is well worth reading. West Asia has been on fire, and India has so far failed to oppose to what the US attempt to widen the war in the Indian Ocean after the sinking of the Iranian frigate that participated in the exercise in Visakhapatnam. India's silence on these issues, I think, speaks a lot about where the foreign policy has turned. This brings us to the issue of India's foreign policy under the BJP. It is clear that this shift did not happen overnight. The Congress government, starting with the Manmohan Singh government, particularly from 2005, bears clear responsibility for initiating that direction. And before that, the Vajpayee government as well. But I think this shift in foreign policy, you could even say this transformation of foreign policy, is something that all of us are deeply concerned about. The transformation is particularly visible in three interrelated developments. The deepening strategic partnership with the United States, the consolidation of an overt alliance with Israel, and the weakening of India's historical commitment to anti-colonial solidarity, especially in relation to Palestine and Iran. They talk about strategic autonomy, they talk about pragmatic diplomacy, but I think there is a deep nexus between the policies followed domestically, the economic policies followed by the present regime, and before that the earlier regime also, and its foreign policy, and that is worth analyzing. The Indo-Pacific strategy designed to contain China, promoted by Washington, represents a major change in Indian foreign policy. And India's increasing participation in this strategy, most visibly through the Quad, is a decisive shift away from the traditional non-aligned approach. While our government presents the Quad as a cooperative framework for regional stability, in practice it functions as part of a broader effort to build a military and diplomatic coalition against China. And this alignment has profound implications. The second major shift is, of course, what we are all familiar with, the transformation of India's relationship with Israel. For decades after independence, as many of us are aware, India maintained a cautious distance from Israel because it strongly supported the cause of Palestinian self-determination. Though diplomatic relations with Israel were established in the early 1990s, earlier governments continued to balance ties with Israel against support for Palestine. But under the BJP, particularly this BJP government, Israel has been elevated to the status of a key strategic partner. Defense cooperation has expanded. Israeli military technology has become deeply embedded in India's security apparatus. And you know the story of Pegasus, sold by the NSO group. I'm a petitioner in the Supreme Court on this issue. They have not come clean. They have not confirmed whether they have it or got it. It's clearly from Israel. And this partnership, the strategic partnership, reflects more than so-called pragmatic cooperation. It represents a convergence between two states that increasingly define their legitimacy in certain states, security states. And Israel, which functions as a frontline state within the architecture of US imperialist power in West Asia, I think is seen as a very attractive partner by the present regime here. And there are many ideological affinities, I don't want to go into that, between the movement that this government represents, the RSS movement, and before that Savarkar, and the Zionist cause. The most striking manifestation of India's foreign policy transformation is its changing attitude or stance towards the Palestinian struggle, the struggle of the Palestinian people. Historically, India can take pride from the fact that it has been one of the most consistent supporters of Palestinian rights in the developing world. And this cause has resonated deeply with India's own experience, its freedom struggle, its commitment to anti-imperialist solidarity. So while India today, the government formally supports a two-state solution, the political significance of this position has been eroded, it has been sabotaged. The government has avoided any serious criticism of Israeli policies and has prioritized strategic cooperation with Israel over political support for Palestinian self-determination. And this reflects the erosion of anti-colonial internationalism within our regime. And the language of solidarity with oppressed people has been replaced by the language of security partnerships, technological collaboration, and geopolitical balancing. The case of Iran illustrates how imperial powers operate in the present world. The US has imposed extensive economic sanctions on Iran as part of its broader strategy for more than 3 decades to maintain dominance in West Asia. The sanctions have profound global implications because the US controls the key aspects of the international financial system. And India's decision to reduce oil imports from Iran and the US pressure demonstrates the effectiveness of the system of economic coercion. And of course, we know what happened with our imports of crude from Russia. And the shameful heading in all major Indian newspapers, US allows India to import Russian oil for 30 days, and so on. So we have become a subordinate partner or ally of the United States on all these issues. Even on the question of the partnership with Russia, and earlier the former Soviet Union. And Russia, of course, is an important partner. Relations have been maintained, but again, attempts to erode this. So I think we have come to a stage where people must protest against this transformation of foreign policy side by side with our struggle against imperialist attacks on various states and the people of those countries. So again, I want to close by saying I would like to express on behalf of everyone here solidarity with those who are facing imperialist attacks in West Asia, in Latin America, and elsewhere. And we look to stronger movements, stronger protest movements in the United States and other political outcomes that may weaken this warmongering by a president who came to power promising to end wars and a deal maker and so on. And just the opposite has happened, and as we mentioned earlier, we have not seen this kind of warmongering and attacks on this scale for many decades. So thank you for this opportunity to present a few remarks, and we hope that others will deal with important aspects that I have not touched upon here. Thank you.
Thank you.